What's up, IT friends? Happy Hump Day. I'm in a number of groups, some with vendors, some with MSP owners, but a common theme I'm seeing more and more of as the average age of MSP owners and vendor owners in this space is starting to push into the 40s. Sorry, folks. The industry's been around for a few decades now. We're getting old. Is this idea that they want to kind of step back a little bit from the industry. And one of the main reasons that I hear about this is that the industry is an echo chamber. And I know exactly what they mean, but I want to talk a little bit about the psychology behind that, because I think that's the right problem being identified, but it's the wrong reason. And if you don't want to watch the whole video, the industry isn't an echo chamber. You built your own, and you just didn't realize it until you spent a little bit more time in it. And we're going to talk about how that happens, because it's not just here and in this business that this happens. This happens everywhere. It's a fundamental component of how humans think. And it's pretty hard to avoid accidentally doing to yourself. So a little bit of a get out of jail free card for anybody that feels like they only hear the same things over and over and over again and they're sick of it. So I did a previous video on the concept of Dunbar's number, the monkey sphere. And this is pretty well understood that fundamentally humans, and when I say fundamentally humans, I don't mean modern humans with self-driving cars and skyscrapers. I mean humans as a animal that's part of the environment on Earth. So like OG humans. Humans were wired to be able to exist in a finite size group. And we see this with plenty of other mammals. While other mammals are certainly able to recognize other members of their species and get along temporarily, all mammals tend to have certain size groups that they socialize in. Not necessarily family. It could be a community. But there's a maximum level of your ability as just a mammal to process relationships and meaningfully maintain them. And most importantly, specifically with humans, to remember that the other people that are sort of within your sphere are not NPCs. And that's what causes a lot of this to happen. There really just is a finite number of individual people that we're all capable of remembering are also their own protagonists in their own stories. And I don't mean if I challenge you in the moment, hey, is Dustin over there a protagonist of his story? Well, of course he is. I don't mean if I ask you a question, you answer rationally. I mean just day to day when you're not thinking, just sort of casually, just going around your day. There's just only so many people that you remember are actual people. I've given the example before. Everybody who's watching has fallen victim to this at some point. If you've ever been standing in a line or been waiting in traffic and have ever had any form of the thought of, I wish everybody would move, I have somewhere to be, that is this effect. In that moment for a second, you forgot that the other people in the line were thinking the exact same thing, all had somewhere to be, and were also people. And it's not anything wrong with you. We're built to operate this way. We were not designed as mammals to be in a globalized community, and we're doing our best. And honestly, given that, we're doing a pretty good job. I don't think dolphins would have done any better with the internet. So good job, humans. But it does cause some interesting behaviors that can lead to this feeling we're talking about. So how do most of us find out about the rest of the industry? I was talking to one of my friends who is far more experienced than I am in this space about sort of the stages of industry awareness that you go through. And I was comparing it a lot to what I think happens to most people who go through their actual lives, where when you're a kid, maybe a teenager, you really only are aware of what is directly around you. Yes, I understand now we have the internet and whatnot, but like putting that to the side for a second, you generally are only able to form relationships and be influenced by mostly the people you directly have access to. And for the majority of young people, that's going to be whoever either geographically lives near them or who they go to school with or where they work. And we do know some people who never graduate from this phase, and we call them townies, and they exist everywhere. Our industry is the same way. There are MSPs who just like, of course, rationally, if I went to an MSP and said, are you aware there's other MSPs? Well, yeah, there must be. I mean, do you know any of them? And a lot of people are at that stage where they may not. They may only know the MSPs that are in their local geography. And when I say no, they may just know of them. They may not even actually know them. So that's the stage that a lot of us start in. And then at a certain point, you become aware that there's a larger industry. You may not be aware of the entire scope of the industry. You may not be aware that there's MSPs in other parts of the world or in, I don't know, as many as you thought there were in your state, whatever. But you become aware of the fact that, hey, this is an industry. There are a number of people in it. I haven't met them all. And what usually ends up happening around this point, I think at least for me, this is when I went to my first industry event. But you have something that happens where you become aware and your ability to interact with people that weren't in your MSP hometown is expanded a little bit. This is not dissimilar from that teenager graduating high school and now going to college. And so you probably at this point will pick up a couple of industry friends. And a lot of people then just live here where they have a number of people who are maybe not directly in their market that they have met, that they like or enjoy for whatever reason, and become their friends. And this is not dissimilar to the college experience a lot of us have had, where back in our hometowns, we maybe knew one or two other people in the school that we really felt like we identified with. And you go to college and, in your first week, you find 20 other people that are into whatever you're into. Or you join a sorority or fraternity, whatever your thing is. And you suddenly realize, hey, there's more people that like what I like. This is great. And you pick a few of those people to be your friends, and odds are they probably still are your friends. So then there's this third stage that doesn't happen to everybody, but happens to the people that are experiencing this echo chamber phenomena. So some people at this point decide to start participating a little bit in the wider industry. They acknowledge the fact that the industry exists. They've met a few cool people from it, and they say, hey, I should do more of this. So they get on social media. They get in MSP groups. They interact with content. They go to more trade shows, attend webinars. I don't know, attempt to form some relationships that are maybe less strong than the small group of friendships they've made, but are more significant in than just casually being aware of somebody. And once again, not dissimilar from when you graduate college and you go out into the business world, and yeah, you still keep in touch with your college friends, but now you make some work friends. And those work friends may end up becoming close friends, but a lot of them are more tied to where you work or the industry you work in. And what usually starts to happen somewhere around this phase is, because at this point you're aware there's a wider industry, you've met a significant sample size of people in the industry. Usually this is where most people start forming a solid opinion that isn't just completely like teenager brain nonsense of kind of where they sit in the pecking order. And I think this is where the trap of us just being humans starts to kind of creep into our brains, because where you sit in the pecking order largely lives only in your head. And for any of us that have spent any amount of time around teenagers, whether you're a parent, you're a teacher, you were serially in university like me, you realize that like this is the same thing where like, when you see like a kid who's like, you're embarrassing me in public, and in your head you like literally no one is aware you exist or is paying attention to you or cares. Like the only person that thinks that you're being embarrassed is you. That's kind of what starts happening here, where we start to establish in our own heads where we are in the pecking order of the industry. That narrative really only exists within our own brains, because every other person that's met you has a completely different version of you in their head. No one else is going to see you exactly the way you see you. So you might think that you are some unimpressive do nothing, and someone else is looking at you like, wow, this person's amazing. I've never met somebody who understands business better. Or vice versa. You might think that you have got it nailed down and you are pretty smart about business, and someone who's met you is saying like, what an idiot. The point is, you can't control what other people, how they perceive you and put you in sort of their mental pecking order. So where you think you sit at this phase is largely just a narrative you've made up in your own head. So the thing is, that's happening with everyone else as well. And some people are aware of it. And that brings us to sort of the fourth stage. You either realize that, hey, I could basically leverage this and start posting being a thought leader. I'm currently in this phase. Or I'm going to be a professional lurker and just sort of sit on the sidelines and watch what everyone does. In either case, though, you're participating. This whole thing we've been talking about is a river. You are standing in the river. And so the thought leaders, and I think this is important to remember, largely fall victim to the Instagram effect, where most people on social media, and this goes back to the human thing we were talking about at the beginning, really tend to only post the good stuff. So think about that for a minute. And don't think about it in terms of MSP life. Think about it in terms of any of those high school or college friends you're still in touch with on, I don't know, Facebook. I'm guessing the aggregate age of people this video applies to. You probably still have a Facebook, and you're probably friends with your high school friends on Facebook. If you're younger than that, well, then good for you. I look forward to hearing in 20 years about your TikTok friends. Anyways, so your Facebook friends, you probably know there's really only two major categories of posts that your Facebook friends that post a lot will post. It's either going to be the positive events in their life, or it's going to be the negative events in their life spun through the lens of how it made them stronger. And I know that there's nuances and things in between, but that's generally the vibe. And so if you think about that, translate that back over now to the business world, that is what all of these people who are in these MSP communities you're in are also doing. They're only posting their wins or their losses that they've turned into wins. And, or at least are pitching as wins. LinkedIn is famous for this. Sometimes that's hilarious. The stretch people go through to take negative things, turn them into a business lesson, but y'all get the vibe I'm talking about. So now you're constantly surrounded by people in a pecking order you've established where you exist in your head that are really only posting an unrealistic view of their business lives. I'm not saying they're doing it maliciously, but that's really all they're doing. And you're either actively participating or lurking watching this. And eventually you'll get to a point where just from doing this long enough, it dawns on you that the industry is even bigger than you realized. You know, someday you have that moment where you're like, wow, I didn't know this person knew this person, or I'm amazed this other area of the world is aware of the area of the world I'm in, whatever. But you'll have that realization moment where you realize the industry is even way bigger, and everything you've been doing up until this point of sort of either being a thought leader or a lurker, engaging with, you know, your industry friends and peers, is just a bigger scaled version of exactly what you were doing when you first went to college, which is you went around and found the other people that had the same interests as you and started hanging out with them, just at a bigger scale. And I think this is where a lot of people start to feel like they're sitting in an echo chamber, because you can have a realization at that moment. And it's a realization I think a lot of us had who did go to university, that, wow, I've spent 4 years with these people and I don't really like all of them. Like, yeah, we have shared interests, but I don't actually like all of them. And so you kind of at a much, you know, more superficial and more business size scale have that moment where you're like, this group of business people that I've been engaging with on social media, events and everything. Yeah, we all have a shared common interest, but I'm not actually friends with all of them, and I'm not actually that interested in what all of them are saying. And I think that's where a lot of us are now, that are sort of in this later stage of our growth journey in the industry, because then you start realizing that, like, oh, wow, I surrounded myself with people who think exactly like me, not people I like. And there's, don't get me wrong, there's an overlap in those Venn diagrams. There could be a lot of people that fit both, but my guess is that there's also a lot that don't. And that's really what causes that feeling of I'm sitting in an echo chamber. It's not that around you an echo chamber coalesced. It's that you, through a series of events that honestly you were genetically wired to perform, you built an echo chamber around yourself, and you've just gained enough wisdom and experience to now realize it. And I don't think any of this is a bad thing. Once you have that realization moment, and I go back to university as a good example. Well, just like with your high school, your university friends, you're probably not friends with everybody you were then. You, at some point after you graduated, you probably had a light bulb moment where you're like, hey, I I can choose who I interact with. And well, I didn't like this particular person, or maybe you had no dislike for them, but you just don't prefer them. You can choose to stop interacting with them, and I think that's a good thing. And so, for a lot of us that are getting to that point where we feel like this space is an echo chamber, that's all that's happening. Is just you're realizing now you have the option to go do something else, or to talk to other people, or to select who you talk to, or how you talk to them. And honestly, good for you, because I think what that will end up doing for most business owners is it allows you to go out and explore new relationships. And so for a lot of us, that's going to mean discovering some piece of the industry or some related industry or some, tangent area of business that you'd never really bothered exploring. And you're probably going to explore that now, and you're going to meet new people, and you're going to go through the whole process all over again. But this is how we get better at being humans. So this is a good thing, even if it feels kind of weird and uncomfortable. What I do notice occasionally, some of the MSP owners I see saying is they've had enough and they want to step out of the industry entirely. And I don't know that I understand the sentiment, and obviously you're the arbiter of your own brain, but I don't know that that's always the best idea. Because getting back to this concept that as humans, we're likely to repeat this cycle with everything in our life, the amount of people that can effectively be hermits is actually pretty small. And even if you're, you feel you're an introvert, you don't really need other people, I don't know, you're very self-determined, you're very confident, isolation probably isn't the healthiest option for a variety of reasons. If you don't care about the social and psychological ones, just keep in mind something that a very, very, very smart engineering shop teacher taught me when I was 19. And we all had to, at Worcester Polytech, we all had to do this shop class. So we would understand the people who work for a living and take our engineering designs, what they would go through. And one of the points he made was, if you get to a point where you think you know enough, where you no longer need to pay attention to the safety lecture, that's the moment when you need to get the hell out of the shop, because you become dangerous. The same applies here. There is a risk that if you completely divest yourself from participating at all in the industry you're in, that's probably going to be your point of stagnation. And if you're sitting there saying, no, that won't happen, I could choose to step back in at any point, you'd be amazed how quickly that river will sweep by you, and suddenly you are completely out of touch with the water flowing around you. You don't know what's happening. And I mean, if you're watching this, you need an example. I don't know, go to the Grammys this year. Lie to me. Tell me you know every artist who's been nominated. Yeah, you have no idea. And because that's an area a lot of us choose to stop paying attention to and see how quickly it happens. And all of us like music. I mean, I don't think anybody here is going to be like, I don't like music. Nobody stops listening to music. But the minute you stop paying attention to what's going on in the music industry, now you have no idea who half the people are. Fast forward a few more years, you're only going to know like two people there, and they're going to be the in memoriam people. So the same thing can happen in your industry. Now, if you're at a point where you've grown to just being an outside shadow government influencing investor type, maybe that's not the end of the world. But most of you are still business owners. So, it's probably not the best move to totally isolate yourself. You just be more selective. Pick the next group that you're going to engage with and recognize that this cycle is a normal cycle for humans to do with any social group. Have a great Wednesday. Keep pushing through your business social journey. And remember that we largely build our own echo chambers. They're not built for us. And we're kind of wired to do that. So it's okay if you wake up one day and have your matrix pill moment and realize that you're in one. It's what you choose to do next. You'll be all right. Have a great Wednesday.